The Texas Water Safari Championship is often called the world's toughest canoe race. Spanning a 260-mile stretch from Ocarina Springs to the faraway town of Seadrift, it's a days-long battle of determination and grit for anyone brave enough to try. This is Tom Goynes, former firefighter, Christian, devoted husband, and winner of 7 total Water Safari Championships. He first came to San Marcos to compete in the race, but it wasn't long before he realized he would settle down here. This is the unlikely story of how one man's love of the river would help preserve its resources for generations to come. This is the King of the River.
In 1963, I remember sitting at our dining room table in Houston, and I was reading the Houston Chronicle, and it had a picture of the winners of the Texas Water Safari, but they were both kind of passed out on this beach. They had to actually be woken up to go on and win the race. But I remember between the picture and the description of the race, thinking, someday I've got to do this thing. When we did get on the San Marcos River for the first time, I was just amazed. You could see the bottom, see fish. It was a love affair from the start. I just loved the San Marcos River, and always have.
Our story begins in 1983. A crowd forms around the Medal Center in anticipation for the 20th annual race to begin. While other teams sat in their boats preparing for takeoff, Goynes would find himself distracted, delivering a prayer alongside friends and family.
The prayer was next up, and it was time for me to leave because my boat was on the other side of the river with Red Motley, my partner. And I thought I had a couple of minutes to make it around to the canoe, but I got detained by this film crew, and they said, we just have one quick question. So I told them, I said, okay, what's your question? And they said, well, we just want to know, why do people do this race? And I told him, I said, that's not really a very simple question. I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to answer it right now. I've got to get over to the other side of the river. So I ran over. My partner was beside himself. We were at least 2 minutes past the gunshot. Everybody was going. I mean, the river was empty. And we got in the water. And he started paddling like a banshee, and I said, Red, stop. He finally stopped. He said, what is it? I said, we had an agreement that we were just going to do this race for fun. We really couldn't beat a 4-man team. So he said, you're right, and we started slow. And we were, out of 51 teams, we were 51st place, but we managed to pass 49 teams by sundown. We paddled in, absolutely convinced that we were second place, and the crowd was cheering, and we thought, well, that's a very nice consolation cheer, but obviously, we've lost. And then they told us, no, you won. You're first.
It wasn't his first win, but certainly his most meaningful in the championship.
Always starts slow, especially there isn't much time to warm up before that race. It starts at 9 in the morning, and you really need to just kind of stretch, get comfortable, settle in, get a pace you can live with, and don't go crazy. You'll catch all those people shortly. Let them go.
But his story doesn't end here. In 2005, the Rio Vista Dam was falling apart, and city planners rushed to rebuild. Doing so would cause the dam to rise 8 feet, making it impossible for kayakers and canoeists to cross safely.
My first approach was to find out what could be done. I mean, my thought was, why are we repairing the dam? Why don't we take it out? So I heard there was going to be a meeting. Everybody that was anybody was going to be at this meeting. So I invited myself. I just showed up without an invitation. And they actually let me sit down at the table. And I waited for the time to come because they were talking about all this emergency repair work that they were going to have to do to the dam and what would happen if the dam completely failed before the engineer and the city could do their reinforcement. And their concern was that if the dam failed, the wall rise upstream all the way to Sewell Park would be affected.
So it's important for the San Marcos River to have a constant flow going through it because it provides the best habitat possible for species like Texas wild rice. And Texas wild rice needs constant flow going over it, or else it's going to get stagnated and it's going to kill off the rice. And when water gets stagnant, floating species and rickia and algae like to float on top of the water, and that doesn't allow the rice to get sunlight that it needs for photosynthesis, so it will die out. And Texas wild rice is an endemic species of San Marcos, also endangered / threatened, so that would kill it off, and that would not be good.
Then I said, okay, well, if you have to have Rio Vista repaired to save the wild rice upstream, would y'all mind if I turned it into Rio Vista Falls instead of Rio Vista Dam? Instead of a dam, can we have a rapid? And they said, as long as we hold back water, we don't care. I had one opportunity and only one opportunity to try to sell this idea of turning Rio Vista Dam into Rio Vista Falls. And that was because I knew Dan O'Leary. Dan O'Leary had been hired as an interim city manager. I was a member of the volunteer fire department in Martindale, and Dan O'Leary was the fire chief in San Marcos. And being a river person and being interested in, always knowing what the flow of the river was, I would call Dan, or at least call San Marcos, and tell them there was a flood coming, and it would be at their place about 7 hours. So anyway, he was very appreciative, and I think that was very helpful when the decisions about Rio Vista had to be made. I called him, I said, Dan, I have an idea for Rio Vista that you really need to hear. He said, Tom, we've already made the decision. We're on the verge of hiring the engineer. In fact, it was imminent. It was going to happen that week. So my next step was to contact a guy named Gary Lacey. Gary entered the water safari several years prior to this, and that's how I knew Gary. And I knew that Gary was in the business of building rapids all over the country, whitewater play parks. I mean, he could turn any dam into a rapid for the right money. And then had a friend in Austin named Ed Travis, who I happen to know had a copy of Photoshop. He took a picture of Rio Vista Dam, and using his magic, he made Rio Vista Falls. It turned out remarkably similar to what we ended up with in its own silly way. But I had a meeting set with Dan O'Leary, and in no time at all, we had convinced Mr. O'Leary and Melanie Howard that this would work. So I knew then that we were on a roll, and sure enough, within a week, it was a done deal. The city agreed to hire Gary Lacey's firm, and Scott Shipley was the engineer that started doing the work on the project right away. So it all happened in a hurry, really, a couple of weeks. It was done. Well, there's no question, once you fall in love with a resource like the San Marcos River, in my case, I just couldn't help but try to protect it, keep it flowing.
30 years ago, Tom was diagnosed with muscular dystrophy.
Did I tell you I had two uncles that had it on my mom's side, and one, they said, "You've got Lou Gehrig's, go home and prepare to die." So he did. He sat in his wheelchair and was very unpleasant to be around. The other uncle, they said, "We don't know what you got, just go enjoy life." And so they both lived about the same amount of time, but one of them was gardening, doing what he could, and staying as mobile as he could, and a whole lot more pleasant to be around. And I decided, watching them, that I would keep going as long as I possibly could, and it's been an adventure. I mean, we're not getting out of here alive. I figured that out a while back, and there are challenges, kind of like the safari, but you can't always do what you want, but just kind of figure out what you can do and do that. I can't race the safari anymore, but I can follow people, encourage people, and enjoy the race as much as I used to.
Today, Tom lives at a campsite in San Marcos, which I was lucky enough to get a private golf cart tour of.
He made me kneel like Henry Hughes, so we modified the building, and that's our chapel now.
And you use that chapel to marry people?
People that paddle in canoes tend to show up for river cleanups. So if I can get them out there with a paddle in their hand, it's a good thing. I just saw that osprey fly over after talking about him.
Oh, I think I see him.
Anyway, that was kind of neat. Kind of a God thing. Anyway, we really need to protect our rivers, what's left of them.
Next time I visit Rio Vista Falls, I'll be thinking about Tom and the contribution he made to a great river.